From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Thank you, Natalie. Hope you're well. Welcome to Monday's Richie Allen Radio Show. Hope you've had a good weekend. You are with Richie Allen, of course. Who else? Live right now on Fab Radio 2 in Manchester, triggerwarning.tv, my own website, and the TuneIn radio app. Lovely to be with you. Look forward to hearing from you during the course of, well, however long we've got today, because I don't know. Lots going on, though. Lots to tell you about. Is it ever any other way? Here we go.
Well, bring out the gimp.
It's the Richie Allen Show. Broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
Well, thanks for joining me early. I'm sure we have a significant reduction in the live audience today because I'm obviously an hour early. I've got an engagement to attend a bit later on this evening. If I hadn't have had one or two problems last week, technically I would have taken the day off. But there you are. I'm glad to be with you. I've been working all day for you. And I've got an excellent program lined up for you over the course of the next hour, maybe hour 15, 20 minutes. We'll see how it goes. Lots and lots of things going on. You're probably, well, pissed right off with the election already. I'm sure you are. There won't be too much election talk on today's program. Just one or two little bits. Lots of human interest stories that we can get into as well. And that is why it is important to me that you tweet to the program and let me know what it is you're thinking, because the Twitter handle is @Richie Allen Show. Get tweeting right now. Spare a thought for Hayden Hewitt, was having a little medical procedure done to his arm or his wrist this afternoon. Never pleasant to have surgery of any description. So local anaesthetic, he was telling me earlier on, meaning that he won't be unconscious, but he'll be a bit sore afterwards, so he will. So big Hayden Hewitt there of Trigger Warning and of liveleak.com. All the very best this afternoon. Yes. So where do you want to start then? Where do you want to, as if you have any say in it, where do you want to start? Let me just bring up my notes, my bullet points. Where are we going to start? Well, I'll tell you what, dear listener. I'll tell you what. We often think, don't we? We often talk, you and me and you and me, about the police state, about how policing in this country is beginning to mirror policing across the pond. It is bad behaviour by police officers. I've lived in the UK off and on for some years. I spent 8.5 years in Spain. But before that I was in the UK, in Manchester. And going way back to the late 90s, I spent a little bit of time in London. I also spent some time in London back in 2013. So I know the UK. And one of the things that was nice about the UK over the years was that police officers were generally approachable. Could speak to them. But increasingly they're becoming more and more, as I said, like their colleagues, if they are some sort of brotherhood and sisterhood, they're becoming like the Yanks. Because I've spent some time in America. And the police officers, well, the ones I met anyway, were ignorami. Awful, ignorant, rude bastards. That's how I found them anyway. Right? Starting to happen here in the UK. Aggressive, thuggish policing. Here's a story. 2 anti-Brexit campaigners. Now you might think you shouldn't have any sympathy for them, Richie. Listen, everybody's entitled to their opinion. 2 anti-Brexit campaigners were pulled over on the hard shoulder of the M25 now, the motorway, and told to take a slogan off of their car. The slogan was bollocks to Brexit. And one of the passengers in the car, well, the only passenger, there were 2 people in the car, the driver and the passenger. The passenger's name is Peter Cook. Great name, of course, in British comedy. Peter Cook said the officer was extremely aggressive towards him and the driver. He said the officer said the slogan bollocks to Brexit was a public order offence. And he insisted that they take the signage off the car on the hard shoulder of the M25. Essex police are trying to figure out what went on because Mr. Cook, the passenger, filmed the officer. And while he was filming him and streaming it on Twitter, he was also giving a running commentary on the behaviour of the police officer, who was very aggressive. This is pretty rotten, this, isn't it? Regardless of if you think he's an idiot for, supporting remaining in the European Union. The policeman repeatedly shouted at him and the driver during the 40 minutes they had to deal with him. And he bullied them, the police officer, into removing part of the slogan. Here is Mr. Peter Cook, live on scene, streaming on his camera phone and talking about what's going on. This went out on Twitter earlier on.
I can find no reference to that word. He's told me not to even say the word now because ladies may be present even though they're not. He's clearly very aggressive, this guy. And I've called 999 because I think he's just trying to trump up a charge because he feels like it. And he's probably a Brexit person. This is absolutely shocking. And I will be contacting the press about it, subject to agreement with my chums, because I'm just the passenger here. But nonetheless, here we have the long arm of the law being used to shut down any form of protest. This will do for now.
Yes, this will do for now, he said. And you know what's really, that's disgusting. What's really interesting about that is bollocks. Bollocks. I said it again. I said it again. It is a word that is not a public order offence to utter. How do I know this? Well, the Sex Pistols. Because there was a case back in the 70s when Nevermind the Bollocks was released and somebody took the record label to court and said, you can't have that, we can't have that, it's rude, it's offensive, it's grossly indecent. And a judge said, no, it is not. It is not grossly indecent, the word bollocks. So the police officer, the uppity police officer, bang out of order. Let's hope he gets suspended. Not fired. Let's not be firing people. Let's suspend him and remind him that he polices by the consent of the public. He's there to protect people and people's property, not to be pulling people over on the motorway because you don't like bollocks to Brexit. It's not funny, that. Serious what's happening. Not only in this country but elsewhere. Tyrants wearing uniforms. How dare you? How dare you? Now. Nibdarar or Nibdar who is listening to the programme. These Twitter names are lovely and exotic these days. Nibdarar says, Richie, here's a story from ABC News. It's a story that alleges in the United States people are being prevented from joining the police because they are too intelligent. Yes! I talked about this years ago on radio programmes with Jim Mars when Jim was alive, God rest him. The police forces undertook around the United States, they undertook a recruitment policy, or they all signed up to a recruitment policy where they were specifically looking for people whose IQs were around the 90 mark. Yes, that's right, Nibdarar. That isn't news, my friend. That's been going on for years. Deliberately recruiting people who, not the brightest in the world. I feel bad when I say that. It doesn't matter whether you're bright or not. But they were looking for characteristics. Aggression. Morons. And I think we're seeing it here as well. Sean tweets, hi Richie, you used the word uppity. Yes, apparently uppity has racial connotations, does it? At least Eamon Holmes, who's a television presenter in the UK, he accused Meghan Markle, the mixed race wife of Harry Hewitt. He said she was pretty uppity, and apparently uppity has got some past, some history. I didn't know that till I read that story, but I'm going to say uppity as many times as I can between now and the end of my life. It is 12 and a half minutes past 4. If you managed to join me, well done. Well done that you saw the social media post. I reckon lots more will be logging on at 5 and they'll be kicking and screaming. But there you are. Well, they can just listen to the... they can listen to the podcast is what they can do. So I was really disturbed by that story, and I hope Essex Police punish the policeman. Don't fire him. Give him a week off to think about what he did. Oh, today, little bit of election coverage. Porkies from the Tories. Porkies from Tories. We had loads of porkies from Tories. They launched their manifesto yesterday, and in it they pledged to add 50,000 nurses to the workforce in England by 2024-2025. Now, Whoppers do not come any cheesier than this. This is a Whopper with extra cheese, a bit of bacon, a few gherkins and an egg. Massive Whopper. And fair play to Julia Hartley-Brewer on Talk Radio. Fair play to Julia. Why? Well, she invited Will Moy on the programme. Will Moy is the chief executive of fullfact.org. It's an independent organisation that holds the liars to account. Will Moy speaking on Talk Radio with Julia Hartley-Brewer. Will, is there any truth in the claim that they will appoint or find or hire 50,000 new nurses, Will?
This whole pledge has got us pretty puzzled, and the Conservatives have promised to try to explain it to us this morning. So
they're lying then?
If we get a decent explanation, it will go up on fullfact.org and we'll come back and explain it. But firstly, they're saying we can have 50,000 more nurses for about £900 million. Now, £900 million is admittedly a lot of money, but it's not what 50,000 nurses cost. Roughly speaking, a band 5 nurse who would earn about £24,000 a year. Once you factor in national insurance and
holiday
pensions
pay,
and all the other things that it actually costs to employ something, roughly speaking, they'd cost about £53,000 a year for the NHS to actually employ. Multiply that out, and it costs about £2.8 billion, depending on what you include, to employ 50,000 nurses.
Imagine what he just said. Imagine the Conservative Party and its moronic MPs. They're going on television every hour of the day mocking Corbyn and McDonnell and alleging that Corbyn and McDonnell's sums don't add up. Imagine. They said 900 mil for 50,000 nurses. Will Moy from fullfact.org just said, well, it's more like 2.6 billion. They're lying. They said they'll get more nurses for us. They're lying. They're lying. Of course they're lying. What else does he say?
So we don't understand at the moment how the Conservatives think they're going.
I understand, Will. They're lying through their effing teeth.
Going to do this for £900 million. And we don't understand whether these are actually...
It gets worse. Are these 50,000 new nurses, or are they existing nurses that they just want to persuade to stay?
Words of the manifesto are 50,000 more nurses.
Yeah.
Well, firstly, as you said, some of these they're trying to improve retention.
Well, I
so
suppose their
presumably
argument would be,
they're
saying
NHS.
is obviously women, some men already working, but who would otherwise be expected to leave if they didn't get extra pay.
Sure, but what do you think of when you hear the phrase more nurses? But the other thing is there's about 40,000 vacancies for nurses in the NHS at the moment, some of them filled with temporary staff. So the other thing we want to know from the Conservatives is, are you just saying we're going to fill mostly vacancies that already exist, maybe change some of these temporary staff?
So there'll be the same number of people on the wards as there currently are. They'll be on staff rather than temporary.
This is what we don't know.
Yes, because they're lying. They're lying. Have you suddenly decided to support the Labour Party, have you, Richie? Obviously not. They lie too. They all lie. They're all multi-millionaire liars. All of them. None of them give a rat's behind about me, you, or the guy standing next to us. Liars. Of course they're not going to get 50,000 nurses. Anyway, 17 minutes it is past the hour. Hi to David, who tweets as cartoon drunk. He says, Richie, all new British police officers need a university degree to join either now or the near future. That's very interesting, David. I think you're bang on there. And I think that, to me, that gives me, well, it gives me, I don't know, some sort of assurance that when people have come on the programme in the past and they have said in the future they are going to outsource policing, or some policing, at least initially some policing, to private companies, that makes me think that. You know, I really do believe that in the future. They're paving the way for private security companies to take on aspects of policing. And I've gotten into that with some interesting people on the programme over the years, so we'll leave that one alone now. Let's move on. Well, hi to Natasha. How you doing, Natasha? Hi to Patrick, who says Remainers might need a brain transplant, but they shouldn't be bullied or treated unfairly or aggressively. Of course not. People are entitled to their opinion. Absolutely right. Paul says, Richie, yeah, the slogan story. The officers say the Ramoners weren't guilty of promoting offensive language. It was, in fact, because it evoked the memory of Vince Cable. Maybe. Was it Cable who coined the phrase bollocks to Brexit? Was it? Hi to David Shaler. How you doing, David, who might be listening? Nice to hear from you, David. I'll be in touch with you right soon. Let's move on. Hi to Sean Fennessy as well. William tweets, by the way, the vast majority of the police are psychopaths. Always have been. That's not fair, William. William, it's not fair. We can't say that because we don't know that. I mean, I haven't met too many policemen and women in Salford, but in my Fallowfield days, I would meet them sometimes on the Fallowfield loop, sometimes mounted police. Piss me right off, but anyway. But other times I would meet policemen and women on foot, and they were generally pleasant. That being said, we weren't arguing about anything. You can't speak to them these days. Maybe you're right, William, maybe you're right. Let's move on. What's next? What is next? Little bit more election stuff, then we'll move on. Labour has said it will put bad landlords out of business and bring in rent controls in England if Labour wins power. Now, this may be relevant to you. It was relevant to me for my previous life as a renter. But that being said, in Manchester, I was lucky as a tenant. I had good landlords. I had a good landlord last time out. We rented his house for nearly 5 years and he was a good lad. He was an honest lad and we didn't have any problems with him. But a lot of people do have problems with landlords, so listen up. Wished. Hey. If you're Irish now, you'll know what the hell I'm talking about. If you're a third generation Irishman living in New York, you'll know what I'm talking about. Wished. Eishtigi. What about my friend in Cork, Anne-Marie Nick Vreen? What about Marie, not Anne-Marie, Marie Nick Vreen? Wished. Eishtigi. Cunis. Moshe de Holle. Right. So Labour says we'll get rid of the bad landlords, put them out of power, and we'll bring in rent controls. They say, Labour, the party, says that private rents would not be allowed to go up by more than inflation, and that landlords would be fined for leasing substandard properties. A Labour government would also bring in open-ended tenancies to protect tenants from unfair evictions. So they've had various Labour people have been on television and radio today, and they have been saying if you are paying your rent on time as a tenant, and if you are not wrecking the place, you shouldn't be basically evicted because the landlord wants to do something else with the property, or because the landlord feels that he might get a higher rent somewhere else. Now, 2 of my friends have houses that they bought for their pension to let. 2 of my friends are living in their own homes, but they've also got a property that they bought to let. So they have a landlord's perspective. They might not agree with Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party. But anyway, open-ended tenancies. They also said that they will have plans that will help tenants and the no-fault evictions will end. Okay. They also said that landlords would face an annual property MOT. Now, your car must get an MOT certificate every year, unless it's brand new, the car. If it's under 3 years old, you don't need to MOT it. But if it's over 3 years old, you need to go every year, as I did last week or 2 weeks ago, and had my car MOT'd, my Renault Megane estate. Right. So Labour says we'll do the same for properties. Well, we'll give them an MOT every year. They haven't said who will pay for this, by the way, because you'll need to have independent, men and women going to inspect the properties. And they said if landlords' properties fail MOTs, they can be fined up to £100,000 or forced to repay back some of the rent to the tenants. It's all very mad. So John Healy is the Shadow Housing Secretary, and he was doing the rounds of the media talking about this today. But rather than hear him talk about that, because I've already explained it to you, this is what Labour proposes. I was interested in something else that he was asked about this morning. He was asked about trade unionist industrial action, secondary strikes, and I'm hugely interested in this because I'm a lifelong trade unionist and I always will be. I always will be. And over the last few days, there's been quite a few stories in the UK newspapers, stories about Labour repealing the 2016 Trade Union Act. Because in the 2016 Trade Union Act, you won't know this, you cretins, you heathens, but you should know this. Back in 2016, it came into law that in industrial action ballots, at least 50% of those entitled to vote must do so. And a majority must be in favour of action, a simple majority. Right? So if 100 members were balloted, at least 50 must vote. If 50 do vote, at least 26 must vote yes for there to be a valid mandate. And trade unionists didn't like that for very good reasons, which I'm not going to get into, because you know why. So that was in 2016. But back in the Thatcher years, Maggie Thatcher, she put an end to sympathy strikes, supportive strikes, right? Talk about that in a minute. And John McDonnell has hinted, he's the Shadow Chancellor, at letting workers go on strike to support employees in other sectors. He's been hinting at this. You know, teachers might go on strike to support rail unions, maybe. And when he was asked about this, John McDonnell, and when he was asked to rule it out, he wouldn't. He said people will have the right to withdraw their labour. So the Shadow Housing Secretary, John Healy, was on Sky News with the Ginger Ninja this morning, and she asked him, did the Ginger Ninja, she asked John Healy about secondary strikes. Listen up.
Just a very quick thought before I let you go. Secondary picketing, where are we on that?
We'll give workers the right to withdraw labour, again, which is commonplace, well established in other mainstream countries.
But secondary picketing, you're in favour of?
We'll legislate to give workers the rights to withdraw their labour if there's good grounds and if there's a basic failure of negotiation with their employer.
Other people who are picketing who might not be part of their union to stand on the picket line shoulder to shoulder.
Our principal concern for workers is that they're better protected than they are at the moment, that we bring in a £10 an hour minimum wage for all, that we end 0 hours contract.
He won't rule it out. And listen, no time for any of them. Don't believe a word that is said by any of them. But the supportive strikes are a good thing. They are. They're not legal just now, but he won't rule it out no matter how much he's pressed by Burley.
Hours contracts, so the workplace is no longer the Wild West for many workers who find that this is their experience day in, day out, week in, week out. And these are basic civilised standards, basic rights that people have as workers in many other European and other countries. Okay. And Labour would bring Britain into line with them.
But he wouldn't rule out reintroducing solidarity action. That's what it's known as, solidarity action. Sympathy strikes. They were legal in the UK until... when did... 79 maybe. Thatcher, maybe the second year of Thatcher, maybe 1980. Thatcher passed the Employment Act, and basically that outlawed solidarity action. You could no longer go on strike in solidarity with some workers in a different sector. There you are. So I like solidarity action, you see. Unions and trade unionism and the rights of workers have been under attack by successive governments for about 40 years in this country. That's what's been happening. Devastating for people and for workers, of course. I could bore the absolute bejesus out of you and sit down here do you know I'm going to do it? Promise I'll do it. I'll do it in the new year, some Friday night. I'll come on air at 8 o'clock with half a bottle of Jack Daniels and I'll have some appropriate music lined up, and I'll sit down and I will give you the history of the trade union movement, the trade unionist movement in Ireland and in England, and I'll make it interesting and entertaining, and you'll be gobsmacked when I talk to you about it. I might even invite people like Tommy Sheridan in Scotland to come on and talk to me. The worst accent of all time. Every single one of my accents sound the bloody same. Let's have a wee pause. Back with more in a minute. This is Monday's Richie Allen Radio Show.
Renowned healer Mark Bajerski travels the world to find the most unique and powerful crystals for self-healing. Since the ancient times, crystals have been used as healing tools. They hold a natural healing vibration and are highly charged in positive energy. Mark teaches how to channel the universal energy and transfer it to the crystal to activate its healing power. Each crystal is used for its unique ability to target a different physical or emotional challenge. Mark Bajerski is an author, healer, speaker, and founder of the Pure Energy Healing Academy. He shares powerful messages of inspiration and healing on his daily YouTube videos, reaching millions worldwide. Mark's crystals, healing oils, and incense sticks are most sought after by other healers. His collection is available online at www.markbajerski.com. His work is presented through Lemon House, a company that creates and curates consciously made gifts.
Welcome back to the programme. I've had a tweet from Amanda. All is good our end. Amanda, all is hunky-dory in terms of the output. Thank you. David just sent a BBC link to the story about police officers requiring degrees. Thank you, David. Yeah, I think that is linked, that, ultimately, to the farming out of policing and certain aspects of policing to private security companies. That's coming down the line. I really do believe that. Hi to Charlie, by the way. How you doing, Charlie? Well, we're going to take a different turn in a second. We're going to talk about climate change because it's in the news again today. Before we do that, though, it's time for a tune. Here's Blues Traveller on the Richie Allen Radio Show for Monday, November 25th, 2019. I'm Richie Allen. Lovely to have your company. Back with climate change news after this terrific tune. Yeah, solidarity today with the members of the University and Colleges Union who are taking industrial action over two disputes on pensions and pay and conditions. About half the UK's universities, lecturers on strike today, and good luck to them. Absolutely right, of course. As a trade unionist, would you expect me to say? They've had problems with cuts in pay, this particular union, other issues as well, big gender pay gap there, and changes to pensions, which are not very good and not, will have real implications going forward for university staff. That's the University and Colleges Union on strike today. So solidarity indeed with them. You probably heard by now that Jeremy Clarkson, I mentioned this on either yesterday on Sunday View or I mentioned it this morning on the YouTube stream, which I'm still doing, by the way. If you haven't seen that, it's a load of bollocks, it really is, but it goes out at 9:30 in the AM for about 40 or 45 minutes. We look through the UK newspapers on YouTube. It's in vision, so it's nice to do something a bit different, but it isn't very serious. It's 9:30 UK time every morning. So there's been a lot of talk about this reversal by Jeremy Clarkson. He's now presenting, what's it called now? He used to present Top Gear, and he's got, the Grand Tour. Yes, it's the Grand Tour now, and he's presenting that. And he was in Cambodia, and he was taking a boat trip as part of a boat race from Siem Reap in Cambodia to Vung Tau in Vietnam. And at one time, the boats had to slow down and the guys had to jump out to wade through a lake called Tonle Sap Lake. But the lake's water levels were really low, and that changed his mind. Jeremy Clarkson was on a river, well, on a lake, that he knows nothing about, and they come to a place where the water levels are low, and they've got to get out and they've got to wade a little bit, and that convinced Jeremy Clarkson that climate change is real.
What kind of fuckery is this?
Yeah, what kind of fuckery? Because maybe they had hotter than normal weather just that one year. Maybe it happened in the past. But Jeremy Clarkson is convinced. Well, it's a big day, so it is now. It is a big day for climate change stories, because one climate change story is doing the rounds today. You're going to hear a lot of this now, going forward, that horrible corporate term. Going forward, you will hear lots of climate change stories on the news. Atmospheric concentrations of CO2 and other greenhouse gases reached new highs last year, according to the World Meteorological Organization. That's what they're saying. Listen to Jane Secker, Sky News host. She'll give you the story.
Levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere have reached a new record high, according to the World Meteorological Organization. Global warming is driving impacts such as melting glaciers and sea level rises. Well, Sky Science correspondent Thomas Moore joins me here in the studio. Thomas, how worried should we be?
How worried should we be? If Vegas is calling the odds, what are the odds that Thomas will say, well, we shouldn't worry at all there, Jane? About 500,000 to 1. Of course, we should be very worried. Now, Thomas Moore is Sky's own environmental reporter. He's an interesting guy. He's written on skynews.com that, as far as he's concerned, the debate is settled. There's no room for climate deniers. Right? And he has said that Sky has no obligation to provide a platform for those who disagree with this. So anyway, she said to him, didn't she, how worried should we be? Here's his answer.
Well, I think what this really shows is the level of political ambition in trying to reduce emissions is falling way short of what it needs to be, because the emissions, the concentration of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere is going up year on year, and the increase every year is getting bigger. We're now at 407 parts of carbon dioxide per million molecules in the atmosphere. Now, that sounds really small.
That's because it is really small.
But levels haven't been this high for 2 to 3 million years, and back then it was a much hotter planet.
What was that? What kind of fuckery is this? You see, Sky will eventually tell you the truth. Sometimes they do, but it's hidden. The truth is hidden as a 7-word sentence, hidden in amongst a pile of bullshit. What did he just say there? Eh?
In the atmosphere. Now, that sounds really small, but levels haven't been this high for 2 to 3 million years, and back then it was a much hotter planet.
What? You've got to say that again. What?
Levels haven't been this high for 2 to 3 million years, and back then it was a much hotter planet.
It was a much hotter planet than now. Tell me more. Tell me more. It was hotter pre the Industrial Revolution. In fact, millions of years ago, when we weren't making CO2, the planet was much warmer and there was more CO2. Tell me more, Thomas.
2 to 3 degrees warmer, and that...
Oh, indeed it was.
...of course, led to much higher levels of sea level, 10 to 20 metres higher.
Oh, I'd love to have been interviewing Thomas there. Because I would have said, Thomas, pray tell, what were the conditions that led to... Please tell me, Thomas, if it was much hotter back then before the Industrial Revolution, Thomas, much hotter, 2 to 3 degrees hotter, what were the atmospheric meteorological conditions that paved the way for such dramatic heat, Thomas? But she doesn't do that. So he's not pressed to explain why it was so much hotter back then.
And that...
Do you know why?
Of course, is due to melting of the poles and of the glaciers.
So back then it was much hotter. Back then we had a bit of melting of the glaciers, and we had higher sea levels back then, before man's CO2 manufacturing. Yes.
We've got these images of some glaciers.
And then Jane, the Dumbo, doesn't say to him, Jesus, wow. So it was much, much hotter, was it? How did it get that way? She doesn't do that. The answer, of course, is the sun. The answer is natural, environmental and atmospheric and meteorological conditions set by that great big ball in the sky, the sun. Right? What else does he say?
How they were and how they are now.
And that's the Rhone glacier in Switzerland, one of the 500 glaciers that has disappeared because temperatures are so much warmer, even at...
No, it's disappearing because we are emerging from the last ice age. We do have a grand solar minimum, apparently, according to some mathematicians, on the way in the next 10 or so years, but mostly we are warming. So the melting that he's talking about there is completely natural. It is not being exacerbated by us and by our presence on planet Earth. It's a lie, you see.
At a high altitude like that. And the Swiss authorities are extremely worried. 90% of...
They shouldn't be worried. There's nothing they can do about it, and it's not going to be catastrophic for us. It's just the natural weather cycles.
Of the 1,500 glaciers that are still there in the Swiss Alps.
Lovely, so there's still 1,500 glaciers.
Could also disappear. And that just shows how much warmer the planet is going. And you can see with the...
We're coming out of the last ice age. We're not making the planet warmer. We're not. We can't. We couldn't if we wanted to. It's impossible.
Those photographs, how quickly the ice is retreating.
And what causes these increases in greenhouse gases?
What causes these increases in greenhouse gases? What is his answer?
Some of it is down to natural events, but also the large majority...
He said some of it is down to natural events. Why didn't she jump in? Exactly how much, Thomas, is down to natural events like volcanic activity on the seabed, which has got nothing to do with warming anyway. Right. Cop onto yourself, Richie. What else does he say?
Of the increase is down to human activity, burning fossil fuels.
Bullshit.
Deforestation, what we've seen with what's happening in the Amazon this year, has been a big worry, and that will be part of the increase that we will see over the years to come. And it's very difficult to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Some of it will be removed, it will be taken up by the oceans, but that causes increases in...
It is sequestered in the oceans, and it is sequestered in the ground and in the rocks, and of course in plant life. Plant life thrives when there's lots of CO2. Jesus.
Acidity in the water, which makes it very difficult for some marine life to survive. But the rest of it will stay there possibly for hundreds of thousands of years, unless you begin huge programs of tree planting to try and suck it back out of the air.
We spoke about that in the last hour. We spoke to
huge programs of tree planting, but those trees will need CO2 to survive, won't they? Presumably. Am I a bit dim, or am I making a good point here? We need to plant millions of trees. Yeah, but we need to keep us around then. Us and the cows and the pigs and the sheep and everything else that breathes oxygen and breathes out CO2. If you're going to make millions more trees, you need plenty of CO2, right?
Spoke to the Woodland Trust, and obviously the UK is a tiny country. Are those kind of ideas making a real difference?
For a start, you need to preserve the forests that you have, so not cutting down the Amazon, making sure that there aren't wildfires in Siberia. Those are two areas of massive areas of trees. But then you need to plant on a huge scale, and that is going to have to be done in every country, not just the UK. And we do have big commitments here to going net zero in emissions by 2050. Every country needs to do that. You're going to see big pressure on world leaders when they gather at the UN Climate Summit in Madrid in the coming fortnight to do exactly that, to make these big commitments, because at the moment politics is falling way, way behind the science.
Imagine that. Politics is falling behind the science. What these people want to do is completely transform the way we live, the way we exist. They want to introduce legislation, rules and regulations so draconian that George Orwell will be spinning in his grave. A 24-hour-a-day lockdown surveillance society where you are told what you can eat, what you can't eat, what you can drink, what you can't drink, where you can go, where you can't go, and when you can do it, based on a lie. John Byrne tweeted, Richie, 407 parts per million, 6% of which is man-made. That's 6% of 400, or about 24. If man stopped producing CO2 altogether, then there'd be 24 less molecules of CO2 for every 1 million molecules of air. How could that make any difference? John, that's a brilliant point. Let's let Piers Corbyn explain. Here was Piers on Talk Radio about 6 weeks ago.
And if man was really worried about CO2, if the powers that be were honestly worried, they should address the fact that termites produce 10 times more CO2 than man. Man is only 4% of the total amount of CO2 produced, and the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere is only 0.04%. So man is 4% of 0.04% of the atmosphere.
And presumably...
which is a trivial amount, but the point is that if man's CO2 is important, then the rest of nature has to obey man. So the termites have to obey man and produce more CO2 when the termites do. I mean, it's a conspiracy of nature. That's what they're telling you to believe in.
And this is why Piers Corbyn will never be invited onto BBC or Sky. I know the BBC had him on in the past, but they won't allow him on anymore. Sky won't touch him because he's telling the truth. That's how ridiculous it really is. Good stuff, Piers. It is coming up for 12 minutes to the top of the hour. This is the Richie Allen Show for Monday, the radio show for Monday. It is November 25th. Thanks for tuning in, wherever you happen to be listening. Love having you on the programme, listening to the programme even. And I think there's a few things we can get through before we end the programme today. Thanks for putting up with the early start today as well. Let me read one or two more tweets there. You have the Twitter, it's at Richie Allen Show. Indeed. Nibdararar came back to me and said, for me, ClimateGate was the moment climate science became junk science. I expected it to sink into the ocean like a melting glacier, but it didn't. Instead, the green agenda was stepped up, and the mainstream media vividly conveyed the eco-apocalypse porn. It's politics, not science, says Nibdararar. Yes, indeed. Hey, listen, on the police going to university, or a university degree being prerequisite as your entrance to the academy in the UK, Diane tweets, Diane in Port Lauriga, Corkig, halfway between the both, I think. Want to know why, says Diane. They're already institutionalised after their college experience. It makes them easier to train. No free thought, says Diane. You might be onto something, Diane. You might be onto something. On that, David tweets, in the 60s and 70s, you didn't need any qualifications at all to join the police, not even a high school qualification equivalent. They used to hire police officers solely on their height and build. You couldn't join the police unless you were at least 6 feet tall, and they used to recruit exclusively ex-military at one time, says David. Hi to Natalie Stacey. How you doing, Natalie? What's wrong with me? Hi, Natalie. Nice to know you're listening today. Hi to Steve O'Neill as well. How you doing, Steve? Blyer is correct in his summing up of Corbyn. After all, it takes a C-nut to know a C-nut. It is a lunatic asylum. It's an inversion. We live in an inversion. It's an inversion. When a psychotic mass murderer like Tony Blair... Oh, Jesus. I'm not going to get into it. What I'm going to do is play another tune.
Just what is it that you want to do?
Well, we want to be free.
To do what we want to do.
We want to be free to do what we want to do. And we want to get loaded. And we want to have a good time. And that's what we're going to do.
Well, wait, baby, let's go.
We're going to have a good time. We're going to have a party.
Primal Scream on the Richie Allen Show. Loaded is the tune. 6 minutes to the top of the hour. If you've just joined, by the way, you might have just joined ahead of the 5 o'clock start. I started at 4 o'clock today because of an engagement that I'll be attending a little bit later on this evening. And you might be annoyed now, but I did put messages on Twitter and on Facebook. But don't worry, this is the beauty, you see, of iTunes, of the TuneIn app, and of course of Podomatic.com. The minute the program is done, it's automatically uploaded. Well, it isn't. I have to do it physically. But I automatically, put it on podcast. So if you missed the first hour of the program, you needn't worry. You'll be able to listen to it later on. I think you might find it interesting. Right, let's move on. So the election is on December 12th, of course. This is a bit of public service broadcasting now. If you plan on voting, though why the bloody hell would you? Eh? Tomorrow is the last day that you can register. Tomorrow, Tuesday, November 26th. Let me just bring up my calendar there, just to double check that. Oh, be Jesus, yeah. Oh, be Jesus, huh? Oh, right, okay, there you are, yeah. So the election then is on Tuesday. It's on Tuesday, December 12th, Tuesday. Tomorrow is your last chance to register if you feel like voting, even if it's only to spoil your vote. Although I say, why the hell would you want to do that? Why waste the time? So tomorrow, right? If you haven't done it by tomorrow, Wednesday, no good. No good. So I was listening to BBC Radio 5 Live Breakfast this morning, and it was very interesting. Operation Black Vote is a charity that tries to get more ethnic minorities to vote. Good for them. The chief executive is Sir Simon Woolley, and he speaks to Rachel Burden. By the way, if you are a ethnic minority person, if you are a BAME person, British, excuse me, black, Asian, minority, ethnic. If you fit that bill, turn away now, because some of the things I say might trigger warn you. Might trigger you, right? So Simon Woolley, Sir, if you please, is the chief exec of Operation Black Vote. They want to get more ethnic minorities voting. He's on BBC Radio 5 Live this morning, and he is speaking with none other than Rachel Burden.
Yeah. Well, as one of your interviewers said, there's lots of frustration, lack of knowledge, and it's a challenge, when you're tackling that level of cynicism that often people say they don't look like us, they don't sound like us, and a lot of the social issues, actually some of them highlighted in your last story, the blue story, are actually alienating tens of thousands of individuals from the democratic process, and that's why we've got together again with our media partners Saatchi and Saatchi and a lot of young actors and actresses, rap artists, to come together with a dynamic film to essentially say that if you don't speak for yourself, others will speak for you, and they might be racist, they might be sexist, they might be climate deniers. So
what the bloody hell was that? What did he just say there?
To essentially say that if you don't speak for yourself.
Now, this is the ethnic minority people. If you're a minority, if you don't go out and vote and speak for yourself,
others will speak for you, and they might be racist.
They might be racist.
Might be sexist.
They might be sexist.
There might be climate deniers.
They might be fucking climate deniers.
So in one of the most important...
They might be Irish.
Important elections.
They might be... I don't know what's going on. Do you know what's going on?
That if you don't speak for yourself...
You don't speak for yourself now, black people and Asian people and other minority people.
Others will speak for you, and they might be racist, they might be sexist, they might be climate deniers.
Jesus Christ.
So in one of the most important elections in a generation, we've got 24 hours to register to vote, and
we've got 24 hours to beat the bigots
and really state your claim and have your voice.
Oh, Christ almighty. I think Burden, the presenter, makes the point to Sir Simon Woolley that black, Asian, minority, ethnic people are very well... Say it again, Rich. Burden makes the point that BAME people are very well represented in UK politics just now.
But the face of politics has changed, hasn't it? You look at Boris Johnson's last cabinet, and out of, about 32, I think almost a fifth of the cabinet members were from minority ethnic backgrounds.
Yeah, we've made big improvements, and Operation Black Vote has been part of that success. So we have more talented black and brown faces in high places.
Well, do you know what there, Simon? Black, Asian, minority, ethnic people are overrepresented in the public and the private sector. They are. When I say they are, I don't see us and them. I'm using his language. They want to separate people. Black, Asian, minority, ethnic people are overrepresented in politics. This is a fact. And this is, of course, because of positive discrimination, you see. Also, BAME people are overrepresented in television and radio. And this is again because of Positive discrimination, you see. This pisses me right off, you know.
I think the key issue, Rachel, is the policies.
The key issue is just to fuck off. If they want to vote, they'll vote. If they don't, they won't. Maybe minority ethnic people, maybe. Or cute whores, maybe. That's H-O-O-R, by the way. H-O-O-R. Maybe they know. There's no fucking point. What's the point? We go and vote what we think is a socialist or a left-wing candidate. Before we know it, we're bombing a country in the Middle East. So it doesn't matter. Maybe BAME people are more clued in, maybe.
You know, when you see levels of unemployment for young black kids raging at 50% in some areas, when you look at the criminal justice system with 51% of youth incarceration is black and minority ethnic youths, and at the higher level in business, for example, you know, it's still rare to see black faces in CEO positions. So whether it's at the top or whether it's at the bottom, there's these continuing race penalties. And actually, that's why, particularly why we say to our communities, that's why we've got to get involved. So you're in a position where we're not asking for justice and equality, that we can demand it. And in this election, funnily enough, which will be won and lost by very, very small margins, actually we have the electoral power to force change.
87% of people in the UK are white. Thank God, white power. Oh, Jesus. I will get myself into trouble. There will come a point when you can't say anything in jest. Everything you say will be believed and taken down in evidence and used against you. That's coming, of course. It might already be here. So 13% of the UK 13% of UK citizens belong to a black, Asian, mixed or ethnic group. Right. 3% are black, right? In the UK. So how can he say with a straight face, we don't see too many people, black people, on the boards of major corporations in England? Well, first of all, only 3% of the population is black, you dimwit. So you're not likely to see it anyway. Really does drive me mad, this nonsense, you know. Again, it's never been a better time to be part of a minority, whatever the minority is, whether it's a sexual orientation minority or a skin colour minority. It's a great time because there is an agenda to give you more than a leg up. So I don't know, if I come back in the next life, I want to be black, or I think I'd like to be one of those Hindus. I think I'd like to be one of those next time I come back. Or maybe I want to be a lesbian dwarf, maybe. Because life is going to be so much easier in the future going forward, the more of a minority you are. Crazy times. 3 minutes it is past the hour. Got another 15 or so minutes with you today. Thanks for tuning in. If you've just joined me and you're wondering what's he bloody well talking about, it's just after 5. The programme began at 4 o'clock today. Alrighty, began at 4 because of an engagement that I will be attending a little bit later on this evening. Now, the alleged inventor of the World Wide Web, Tim Berners-Lee, accused the Conservative Party of spreading misinformation during the general election campaign. This is all about how they renamed one of their Twitter accounts as a fact-checking body. That's what they did last week during the debate between Jeremy Corbyn and Boris Johnson. That was last Tuesday. And the Tories renamed one of their Twitter accounts as a fact-checking body. And Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the alleged inventor of the World Wide Web, he said that was an impersonation. It was bloody brazen, he said. Here he is speaking to the BBC today.
That was really brazen. I think they got called out for it. So something like that are really, that was impersonation. Just that's something. Don't do that. Don't trust people who do that.
What would your message be to the Conservatives about what they did there?
Really,
yeah, bastards.
What they did by impersonating an independent organisation. Yep, it was unbelievable that they would do that.
Yes, absolute shower of lying bastards. Of course, it's unbelievable, but they got away with it, didn't they? What price will they pay for it? None. But so are Labour, lying bastards. They're all the same. Westminster Digital's Craig Dillon, he's he's a journalist who writes about tech. Craig Dillon was on Sky today, and he was asked if Facebook should follow Twitter and ban election ads entirely.
No, it definitely shouldn't. And Twitter banning political ads was never really a big deal, because that's not the people that you ever want to reach. Most people on Twitter have already decided which way they're going to vote in an election, so that's not the target market for political advertisements. So
Facebook is more nuanced, though, isn't it? In terms of there are algorithms, you can target people based on their interests, where they live, their age, their ethnicity. And it's that information that's being used with political adverts that a lot of people feel uncomfortable about, because these adverts are targeting you specifically. Does that not make you feel uncomfortable?
No, because I think a lot of the time what you have to do in political ads is there's a bit of a belief that if you just target things at people, they're going to watch. You know, if we look, for example, in the European elections, Change UK spent more money on political advertising than any other party did during that, but they got nothing in the way of sort of votes and things. So it's not as simple as just throwing money at it and getting results. It's got to be a lot more targeted, and it's got to be a lot more sort of in the message. It has to actually resonate with people. You can't just throw money at things and then you win. I think it's too easy and kind of lazy to just attack Facebook and blame everything on fake news and things like that, when actually there's a lot more behind this. Often it can be, and especially what Sasha was saying, it often can feel like people like that are saying, I'm so smart, I never fall for fake news, but what about all the stupid people? We've got to look out for them. And I think it can be quite condescending, you know?
Yes! Hallelujah! 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 It's outrageous. Again, it's making victims of people, isn't it? You are victims. You need to be protected from things that are said by others that might be wrong. We need to protect you. It's outrageous. You are vulnerable as a populace, as a population. You are vulnerable. You need to be protected by us so that you don't see things that are untrue. But who gets to decide what's untrue? Very good, Craig Dillon. However heinous Facebook is, however wretched Twitter is, horrible organisations, no governments should be telling them that they have to ban election ads. We aren't thick. We know we are being lied to 24/7, you see. I'll be back with you after this very short message. Don't go anywhere. It's the Richie Allen Show for Monday.
Renowned healer Mark Bayersky travels the world to find the most unique and powerful crystals for self-healing. Since the ancient times, crystals have been used as healing tools. They hold a natural healing vibration and are highly charged in positive energy. Mark teaches how to channel the universal energy and transfer it to the crystal to activate its healing power. Each crystal is used for its unique ability to target a different physical or emotional challenge. Mark Bayersky is an author, healer, speaker, and founder of the Pure Energy Healing Academy. He shares powerful messages of inspiration and healing on his daily YouTube videos, reaching millions worldwide. Mark's crystals, healing oils, and incense sticks are most sought after by other healers. His collection is available online at www.markbayersky.com. His work is presented through Lemon House, a company that creates and curates consciously made gifts.
Right, welcome back. Let's move right on. It is the Richie Allen Show. I'm going to say for the final time, if you tuned in at 5, I'm not going to be with you for much longer. I've been on the air since 4 o'clock. Sorry about that. I did mention it on the live stream this morning, and then I did make a mention of it on Twitter, and Raj put it on Facebook for me a bit earlier on. I'm doing something later on this evening, and I needed to start a bit earlier. It didn't suit my guests either, but that's okay. I'm packed with guests this week. Terrific guests tomorrow, including Matt Landman returns to the programme. He's not been on for ages, so Matt Landman on the programme tomorrow. So forgive the early start and earlier finish today. I haven't bored you, have I? I don't think so. I think it's been reasonably interesting this afternoon. Lots of interesting things to talk about. Let's move on then. 10 minutes past 5 it is. Got another 10 or 15 minutes, I think, before I will be departing you today. Where was I anyway? Oh, Jesus. I've lost where I was now. Just give me a minute and I'll find it again. We did the Tim Berners-Lee, didn't we? We did. Look, this is... I watched this with interest today, and I did mention it on the live stream this morning. A second cinema chain has pulled a film called Blue Story, which apparently is a very good film. It's been given very good reviews. And it's got a gang theme running through it, but it's a love story apparently. It's been made by a young black filmmaker. Apparently he's shit hot. He's apparently very, very good. And he's made this film called Blue Story. And in Birmingham over the weekend, there was a big brawl at the Star City Multiplex. And there were young men and women with machetes there. Jesus, it must have been absolutely terrifying. This happened. And apparently a second cinema chain, along with View, because View has banned the film from its 91 theatres in the UK. And Showcase has now followed suit and dropped the film as well. This must be really, really, really upsetting for the people who made the film. Because apparently it's a good film, right? Very good film. So they've pulled the film, and some people on social media are declaring the ban to be a racist ban. Now, I think that's horse shit, to be honest. I think the cinemas are genuinely worried because 5 teenagers were arrested in connection even with the disturbance in Birmingham. There were nearly 100 people involved in this brawl. There were a lot of children around as well because it was early Saturday night. There were children there to see Frozen 2, God help them. Now, View made a statement and said the film had opened in 60 of its venues across the country and in Ireland as well. But during the first 24 hours of the film, over 25 significant incidents were reported and escalated to senior management in 16 separate cinemas. Now, this is part of the statement from View. We've got a View cinema nearby, right? They said this is the biggest number of incidents we have ever seen for any film in such a short time frame. So we pulled the film, said View. Now, their statement makes it look like they're very upset that they pulled the film. But the people who made the film are not happy. I totally understand that. And here's a guy called Umar Kankia. Now, Umar Kankia makes a very interesting podcast called Dope Black Dads. It's worth checking out, I think. He had earlier written to View to ask why the Birmingham cinema had dropped the film. Now, the group have released the statement that I just read today, where they said, look, there were serious incidents in other cinemas. That's why we dropped it. What does Umar Kankia think of the View statement? You might find it surprising.
I think the issue is, why is it that what happened in Birmingham on Saturday was the thing that was triggered? And, this is the first time that we're actually hearing that there has been this many incidents in other places as well. And I got a copy of that statement not long before I went on the air. And actually, it seems like this is an exercise in deflection by View and by Showcase. I appreciate, obviously, the statement has come from the View from View Cinemas.
What did he just say there at the end? In the statement, they said we've had 25 significant incidents across 16 separate cinemas. In Birmingham, we had people running around with machetes. With machetes. View said. With machetes, they said. Right? That's why we've cancelled the film, they said. And in their longer statement, they said the film is brilliant. And we're really upset about this. And what does this guy think, this Umar Kankia, after hearing the statement by the cinema operator?
Exercise in deflection by View.
What?
This is an exercise in deflection.
What?
It seems like this is an exercise in deflection.
What?
It seems like this is an exercise in deflection by View.
What kind of fuckery are you?
Well, they've hardly made it up, mate. Deflection? Racism? Give me a break. Give me a break. So what does he think is going on then?
And really, the issue is, okay, we've sent out an open letter. They've not actually bothered to respond. And within that letter, we've actually made it quite clear, trying to understand their decision-making process. Is there a precedent to this? Because as people know, there are a lot of other violent films that are out there at the moment, Joker being one, and obviously years ago when The Dark Knight Rises came.
This particular film strikes a chord because you're talking about a film that's...
Hang on now, Sarah. Hang on now. What did he say about Joker?
This particular film strikes...
There are a lot of other violent films that are out there at the moment, Joker being one, and obviously years ago when...
Joker, yeah. Yeah, Joker is violent. I saw it the other day. It's a little bit violent. Jesus, having been told how violent it was, I was a bit underwhelmed, to be honest. Thing is, though, is that when Joker was shown around the country, gangs of kids with machetes and knives weren't turning up to watch it and then looking at each other and realising, oh, that guy's in that gang, and then kicking 9 kinds of horses shit out of one another. Right? They haven't cancelled the film because they claim it's violent. The cinema operator is saying we're cancelling it because we can't be sure that gangs of youths who fancy themselves as tough guys won't turn up and scare the bejesus out of our other patrons.
This particular film strikes a chord because you're talking about a film that's regarding impoverished, disillusioned young people from different postcodes, and we know that there are gang postcode warfare. So it's only right that those who see real life reflected on screen want to go and see that film. So there's kids from different postcodes coming to a central Birmingham cinema to watch this film, and of course a big group of youths. This can happen. So do you see the reason behind their safety argument?
Well, I can.
He can, reluctantly.
I can, to an extent, but, you know, let's...
What do you fucking mean, to an extent? 25 major incidents across 16 cinemas. Young men and women that are in gangs hear about this film, which isn't about gangs per se. Apparently it's really good. I'm not virtue signaling. I read 1 or 2 film reviewers in 1 or 2 different newspapers that I like, that I trust, and they like this film. It's a love story across a gang rivalry. But obviously gang members, knowing this, want to go and see it from different gangs. And what are gangsters? They are fucking criminals. They are arseholes. They are violent. And they're going to kick off. And the cinema says, well, geez, we can't carry the film at the moment. It's not good enough for this guy.
Safety argument.
Well,
I can, to an extent, but, you know, let's break down what happened.
Let's not break down what happened. Let's not listen to this arsehole anymore. Oh, identity politics, eh? Identity politics, eh? It'll be the death of all of us. You know, my identity is I'm black. Some of those kids were black. The director is black. So I've got to stand up for it. Yeah, by all means, it's a tragedy. The film isn't going to be seen at the moment in cinemas, but it's not because of racism. Jesus Christ. They were showing it in 60 theatres, you know. Okay, I'm nearly about to finish. Faisal is listening. He says, we had street gangs in my day, Richie, but postcode gangs. Yeah, we had gangs. But it seems to be a bit different these days. You're getting a lot of people getting stabbed in places. It's not nice. And if you're running a cinema, you have a duty of care to the people who come and watch films. You can't have people running around with machetes. It's just not good. And to say that we can't have that is not racism. This is how fucking crazy the world is getting. You know? Paul tweets, Joker is a comic adaptation. This new one is holding a mirror to real life. That's the difference. These people that chat this sort of shit are inserting themselves into the narrative with such a tenuous argument in order to be seen as being relevant and incisive. Paul, I haven't a clue what you just said there. I jest. These are the damned, or Stuart. Stuart it is, as I know. Release a film that wouldn't normally get shown in multiplexes. Problem violence from gangs. Reaction ban in the film. Excuse me. Let me read that again. Richie, release a film that wouldn't normally get shown in multiplexes. I would argue with that. But anyway. Problem violence from gangs. Reaction ban the film. Solutions. We now want to check your bags for weapons and walk you through scanners in the cinema. Stuart, I think you're jumping the gun there, no pun intended. I'm not saying that won't come down the line, my friend. It might do. But I'm not sure that's what's going on here. As far as the film not getting shown in multiplexes, I wouldn't agree with you. It's a film, a British film, from a young British filmmaker. And the Academy in this country, BAFTA and the universities, they're working very hard together to get more exposure for young British filmmakers. I think the film would be given a shot in the multiplexes, my friend, not just to disagree with you for the sake of it. I don't think that's the issue at all. As for the rest of your tweet, you might be right. Who am I to argue? And Susan tweets, how you doing, Susan? West Side Story, she tweets. West Side Story, indeed. I think that's about all I've got time for today. An hour and 20 minutes today. It's not been bad, has it? Finishing a bit earlier, starting and finishing earlier today. Back to normal tomorrow at 5 o'clock. But before the radio show at 5 o'clock tomorrow, I will join you, of course, on the live stream. The live stream, which is on YouTube every Monday to Thursday at 9:30 UK time, where I look through the papers and it's a little bit of gas. All right. Thanks for listening today. If you came on at 5, apologies. But the programme in its entirety will be on podcast in a few minutes' time, and it will be on YouTube in about an hour's time, so panic not. All right? Thanks for listening to me today. Look after yourselves and one another, and we'll do it all again tomorrow. I think I read all your tweets out today too. Nice to get back to normal, eh? Here's Sting closing out the programme. Brand new day on your Richie Allen Show. See you tomorrow. Bye.